This is a big deal today. Our church is walking through these series of messages on 2 Corinthians. The umbrella topic is grace under pressure. The idea of how to find something grace-filled, strong, wonderful in our life, even though the pressure from the outside pushes us down. How can we live in that? And you can't find anything actually more relevant for today's life than the idea of finding grace under pressure. And through this series of messages, we have been looking at Paul's ideas. He talks about comfort, he talks about forgiveness, he talks about being hard-pressed, a heart wide open. He's been honest, he's been transparent. But today, friends, let me tell you, today you're going to see something I hope you will understand, and maybe for the first time appreciate deeply and hold on to. Kind of like, those snow globes that you get at Christmas time that you shake up and you kind of wait for the snow to fall and all the fuzz to get out of the way so you can see a picture of another world. A picture, an icon, an image, a vision of another world. That's what I want to do today. I want to let the snowflakes kind of fall and give you a picture of what I think it's like the gospel in miniature. It's like a tiny, tiny version of a huge, huge thing. So we're going to start at verse 16. We'll just go through it. Many of you are following this along in small groups, and you get an email from our church office summarizing the sermon with a couple of questions, and I think there'll be a lot to talk about this week as you process this in your small groups. And many people want to join a small group. We've got a small group desk out in the fellowship hall. You can join there, go there, sign up, and they'll help you find one. But Paul makes 3 declarations here about this image that appears in the snow globe. First, he says that we have changed. We personally have changed. Look what he says in verse 16. So from now on, we regard no one from a worldly point of view. Though we once regarded Christ in this way, we do so no longer. What he's saying is that because we have seen Christ, he knows these people that he's writing to. He planted a church 18 months earlier. He has sent 3 or 4 letters to this church. He knows them. And so he says, we don't look at people the same way we used to. You know the way you used to look at people? Checking them out, sizing them up, discarding the ones you didn't like, abusing them, stepping on them, telling them to get out of the way, putting them in their place, judging them, putting them in little boxes, socioeconomic, ethnic kind of boxes. Paul says, we don't regard people that way anymore. We used to, but we don't regard people that way anymore because we see what happened to Christ. Because Christ was human and he lived in the form of flesh and he taught and he preached, but then he died and he rose again. And so because he did that, we don't see people in the same way. We see everybody as kind of like children of God. Cross ethnic lines, cross racial lines, cross socioeconomic lines, cultural lines, national lines. There's this sort of great egalitarianism where everybody is seen by God as the same, and we see them that way. You look around here. There's a big church. A lot of people gave money to this church. We don't have special pews for people who gave the most. Right up here in front where they can see, or if they would really want one, all the way in the back where they can escape. We don't have that. We do have a guy at the earlier service, 9:15, that sits in the same pew every single week. And a couple weeks ago, he brought a little lunch bag to church. And he sat in the pew, and I saw him before the service. I says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, my kneeler squeaks, and I have my can of WD-40 to fix my own pew." I told the story. I pointed them out so everybody could see this guy in case their pew squeaks. He could come by and fix it. We don't see people that way. We don't see people rich and poor. We don't see that anymore. Or at least we're not supposed to. It's hard. Let me tell you, it's hard. This last week, Fran and I were in Peru, and I had whiplash. I couldn't imagine. Here we got on a plane, we flew to this country, we got in a car, we drove out to this little tiny place, and I recognized we're in a shanty town. These people have nothing on the floor. The boxes that you and I throw away at Christmas time, they fetch in their own countries and put on their walls. They live in such squalor and such abject, grinding poverty. It is so easy with an American understanding to dismiss them. They're nobody. They're nothing. Who are these people? They won't amount to anything. They'll never do anything. They'll just sort of live and breathe and eat and die. It's so easy to think that way from a worldly point of view. We drive through the place where our construction team this week is going. The main road's cut off, so they've have a detour through the largest cemetery in Peru. It's not anything like you've ever seen. It's not like the cemeteries like Restland or Turrington Jackson and Morrow or Sparkman Dickey, where all the vaults are lined up perfectly and all the grave sites are there and all the grave the markers are there and it's beautifully manicured. Nothing like that. We drove in, and off to the side there's some dilapidated mausoleums. But then we kept driving. That's where the wealthy people put their dead. But as we drove into this cemetery, which goes on, I'm not exaggerating, for miles and miles and miles of hills, you could see that they were all dappled with shallow graves, where people took their loved ones who had died without casket, without coffin, without any kind of box, and found an empty spot on a hill and dug through that hard rock and into a shallow grave and laid their loved one and then put the rocks back over the body to create just a little dapple in the hill. And the place was just littered with these graves. It was so creepy to drive through this. And I thought, oh my God, we are in the valley of the shadow of death. And then we turned a corner and we saw the church that we're helping to build down there, the Holy Family Church. And we drove down into the little community and we got out of the car, and first the dogs came up, and then the little children came up, and then the women carrying the little children, and then the older men came up and they gathered around. And the pastor, Padre Aurelio, organized them into a choir. And they started to sing. Alabanza al Señor, alabanza al Señor. And it was bizarre to think what we've come through. I mean, I have more money in my change jar at home than these families will see this year. And we fly into Peru, and we drive through this death. And on the other side of that are people who, in worldly terms, will add up to nothing. But they were praising God. They were giving glory to Him. They were reflecting in their own simple, wonderful Peruvian way a love of God that you and I share.
To make a monetary gift that supports the ministries of Christ Church Plano, visit christchurchplano.org.